Hi everyone, welcome back to another continuing education check-in. Today we're talking all about attachment styles. I read a book recently not that recently.
Book?
No, same book.
Oh, okay.
Okay, a while ago. And so Sania has read the same book and has just finished. And so now it's time for us to talk about what are attachment styles. This is kind of a new phenomenon people are talking a lot about, especially talking about mental health, but this has big implications about relationships and how we react to them. And so we're going to try to give you as much information as you can to understand how these can affect your relationships.
Yeah, and we've been talking about sort of the attachment styles a little bit, like here and there in our other episodes, and I'm sure they're going to come up again in the future because I just finished this book yesterday.
Wow.
Like on my commute home from work, and I just feel like it's so like relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And Ethan actually gave me the book because he read it, and then he figured that like it would be really, really helpful for me to also learn from it.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most, how helpful was it?
I'm gonna do like a 7 or 8.
Okay.
It's like pretty, I guess like it's not a 10 because like for something to be helpful, like that's like on you of how much you're gonna apply from what you're reading.
Uh-huh.
But like, I feel like this book made me like analyze myself a lot.
Yeah.
And then it also made me have a lot of conversations with people around me. Like there's a section that makes like, oh, like make your partner do the quiz and like see what kind of attachment style they have. And like that stuff was pretty fun to do and pretty informative.
Definitely. And I think for me, when I read the book, I would give it a usefulness rating of 9.
Okay.
And I think when I read the book, I really needed it.
Yeah.
Just because I wasn't understanding how I was reacting in my friendships and relationships. Mm-hmm. And this just made everything so much more clear. Okay. And so the book, we're going to pop it up right now. Mm-hmm. It's called Attached, and it's written by Amir, Levine, and Rachel Heller. So if you're interested, you can go search it up, buy it at your local bookstore. It's a popular book, so you can find it pretty much everywhere.
I think I like took it to the park one day to read. Yeah. So maybe the reason also I should say my rating is not so high is because it took me like, I think I read this book over a span of like 6-7 months.
That's true.
Because I started reading it and then it got like really real and like, you know, maybe it like put up a mirror that I didn't want to admit to or I didn't want to see. And so I felt a little uncomfortable reading it. It wasn't just like light reading. And so I kind of paused. And then I started reading it again, and it made me have some serious conversations with people. And then I was like, okay, this is too much. Like, I need another break. So, like, that's why it kind of took me a while to finish reading it. But when I did take it to the park one day to read, like, a girl just randomly started talking to me about it. She's like, oh my gosh, like, when I read the book, I was like, I thought I was a secure attachment style at first, but by the end of the book, I was anxious. Like,
wow.
So it's a very popular book.
Yeah. When I bought this at the bookstore, the girl at the counter, she's like, oh, this is going to be so good. And then when I first talked to Breadcrumber on Hinge, I just mentioned I like reading. And she's like, oh, what have you read so far or recently? And I brought up this book. I was like, I just read this one. I really like it. And she's like, I just read that one. And that's like how we hit it off in the beginning. Wow. Because of this book. Yeah. So screw you, book. So Sania, you just read this book. Can you start going into what the different attachment styles are and what makes them different?
Yeah. So, okay, there's like 3 but kind of 4 attachment styles, and you should just like make like a grid in your head. And the first attachment style, which is the most popular one, is secure. And so you said also explain what they are?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Okay, like a secure attachment style is just somebody who is, you know, very good at asking for what they need in a relationship. They're very good at communicating what they're feeling. And they're good at trying to understand what the other person's feeling. Because, like, yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that. And then the next attachment style is anxious. And this person is very worried. Like, if something seems off, they're going to spiral. Like, down this rabbit hole of, like, what did I do? How do I get this person back? Are they going to leave? And they're in, like, a battle with themselves. I don't know, is how I would like to summarize it.
That's good.
And then another attachment style is the avoidant. And that one is, like, one that kind of makes sense to me. Kind of maybe I'm going to need help from Ethan. They want a relationship, but they also want their independence. And, like, they don't like when people are too much in their space. Mm-hmm. And then the final one, I hope you've been paying attention, is anxiously avoidant. So it's a mix of our last two. And you have, like, a little bit of, like, traits from both, I guess. Mm-hmm.
And which one are you?
I was looking at our sheet, and I was like, wait, that's a question coming up.
Yeah.
Based on because the book also, it's not just like a light reading thing, as I was saying earlier. You know, it has tons of like tables for you to sit down and like fill in and like reflect on. Yeah. And I will say, especially when I started reading it, I was like it was like homework. Like, I was doing it as I was reading. Wow. Doesn't matter if it was midnight. Like, I would take out my pencil and paper and I would like jot stuff down. Towards the end, it became like, list like every relationship you've ever had and like why it was like problematic. And I was like, but I did it mentally instead of writing it down. Yeah. So it has like exercises, and based on those exercises, I think that I fall into I'd say like maybe like 75% anxious and like maybe 25% avoidant.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say like anxiously avoidant, but if I had to just pick, I don't know, maybe just anxious. I don't know.
Okay. But you don't think you fall into anxious avoidant? I
mean, I did at the beginning of the book, but towards the end, as they talked more and like figured, like, you know, tried to understand more like the thinking process of like an avoidant, I know I'm not at that extreme. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, maybe if you're getting closeness from somebody you don't want closeness from, then I become avoidant. But I feel like that's not really avoidant. That's just not interested.
Yeah, that's not avoidant.
So, yeah, maybe I'm just anxious then.
Okay.
What about you?
So, it's hard to tell, but I'm somewhere between anxious and secure right now. But when I was reading this book, I was anxious. And so I've mellowed out a little bit. And
I love that Ethan said right now in your sentence, because the book also, like, and also I don't want to keep saying the book tells us this, but like, you can change your attachment style. Yeah. Just based on, you know, who you're in a relationship with. And it could, even if you've never read this book and you're anxious, but you're with a partner who's very good at communicating themselves and very good at like, you know, being there for you and stuff like that, you can automatically, like, all your anxieties and worries could go away. And like Ethan said, you could mellow out and become more secure yourself. You know, you can see that if my partner is able to ask for what they want, maybe like I can do it too. Mm-hmm. And like, so definitely your attachment styles can and do change.
Yeah, definitely. And just to give a little more context on that, a lot of times we develop our attachment styles based on how we were raised as kids. Mm-hmm. And so the level of attention that our parents gave us, especially when we sought out their attention by crying or by trying to interact with them, based on how they respond to that, if we learned to like be independent and not need our parents' love and attention because they didn't give it, then we tend to grow up and be avoidant. And then if like we're crying and seeking out our parents' attention, and maybe they do give it to us, but then we continue and try to keep them there, then we develop into someone anxious. And so even like those play a role into how we are today. But in the same way, the relationships that we have now, our friendships, romantic relationships, those and how they give us attention, that can still mold us.
I really like how you put that, because in the early chapters of the book, they talk a lot about how your early, you know, childhood developmental years kind of shape your attachment style. And they talked a lot about, your relationship with your parents and like, you know, like a secure child, like in terms of like just being curious and exploring new things. A secure child would be able to do it with or without their parents present. An anxious child would only feel the confidence to do new things when their parent is present. And then an avoidant just like wouldn't care.
Right.
But I think when it talked about that relationship with their parents, like, I kind of was like not putting myself in the anxious box. Because at least based on the way that they were defining it, I felt like, oh, you know, like my parents were always there. Like I never had to like cry for attention, this and that. But the way that you just described it now, I'm like, for sure I'm in that anxious box.
Yeah.
Because the way that you're kind of, the way that you understood it and are explaining it, it's more about like, what do you do when you're not getting that external attention or support or like stuff like that. So it's not about, it has nothing, because I guess when I was reading it, I was like, how dare they say my parents were not good parents, that they didn't love me right, and that's why I'm like this.
Yeah.
But I think the way you put it is a lot more about ourselves, and it's a lot more like, oh, how did we react to when external people were around or not? What, like, whether it's your parents, your friends growing up.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like definitely when I was back home in Halifax, I was way more on the secure side of the spectrum than on the anxious side, just because of the individuals that I was around. But definitely the moment, you know, I'm here in a brand new environment, it definitely like made me way more anxious to the point that like even aside from like attachment theory and like in relationship respect, but just like I would be FaceTiming my mom and she was always like, you just seem so like stressed out. You seem so worried. Like, is something wrong? You constantly seem like there's something wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, completely agree with you on that, Ethan. The people around you shape your attachment style.
And even your circumstances, because you brought up when you moved here, and when you make such a big life change and you have to kind of start from zero and build new relationships, every relationship starts to feel high stakes, and you want it to go well. And so the way that you start reacting, it's almost like you're a baby again, and you're forming relationships for the first time. And
I feel like, a lot of my avoidant tendencies, if any, I also picked up being here, because I was just like, oh, like no one's good. Like people here don't compare to people back home. Or like I don't even want to bother making lifelong friends here. Like I already have those. Like it was very like that was my approach on things.
Yeah, for the longest time you were saying that you wanted to move back to Canada. You told everyone
I
that.
still do. But a little bit less so.
Yeah, I also see that if you like stay here longer, if you decide that this is where you want to be, I can see that also start to change, because then you're making active decisions to make this your home and find
and
your
not
people.
be so avoidant and running away from true.
Yeah. And to be honest, like knowing you, I don't think you're avoidant at all. Of course, like certain situations will have like certain tendencies, but and we're gonna break this down just a little more. One last point that I want to make is, I think when you're thinking about this, you should always look at it on a spectrum. And so Sania and I, we've pointed this out already in our own attachment styles, but you don't have to just be one or the other. There is like this spectrum, and you can be in between and shifting around. And so we're gonna start going into how these can affect our relationships.
And just before we get into, because obviously this is a relationship podcast, we're going to talk about, you know, how it affects your romantic relationships. But I do also want to note that I was in a very troubling personal relationship, not a romantic one, but just a different relationship. And this book was like super eye-opening for me for that as well.
Yeah.
Like even in terms of like, you know, like friendships, like this troubling friend that I had, like I could just see like a lot of her behaviors that I was taking personally because I'm anxious. That was just her way of protesting and demanding attention. It was nothing more than that. So I think it's a good read, whether you're doing it to have a healthy romantic relationship or just like a relationship in general.
Yeah.
You know, it helps you understand your parents' behaviors, your friends. Like, I feel like it's really, it's just, it makes you a more understanding person, I guess. Which, like, everyone can use a little compassion and understanding in life. So go out there and get educated, guys.
Yeah. So the first example I'll bring up was a friendship. And so this was back when I was very anxious. And so for me, I really valued intimacy. And in a friendship, that just looked like a deep friendship.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask them about their personal life, get to know them as they really are. And in general, I'm that type of person when I become friends with someone.
Ethan doesn't know me at a deep level, you guys.
Wait, are you serious?
Keep going.
And my first friends when I moved out here, one of them was very avoidant.
Okay.
And so I'll break it down like this just to make things very simple for you guys. As someone who is anxious, I valued intimacy, and in conflict, I do not communicate well. So then for my avoidant friend did not value intimacy. They were not comfortable being vulnerable, and that's just who they are. That's neither good nor bad. And then in the face of conflict, they will communicate, but not necessarily in an effective way.
Yeah.
They would always put the responsibility on the other person.
Okay.
And so to give you an idea of how that played out, so this is when I kept trying to get closer to my friend, she would just pull away.
Okay.
And at first I thought that she just didn't want to talk about specific topics. But in my mind, I was like, if I am nice to you, if I just ask the right questions and find out what makes you tick, you'll gradually open up and become more responsive. But I didn't understand that someone with an avoidant attachment style, yes, they can make progress towards the other side, but it doesn't happen quick, and they also have to take steps themselves to change.
Okay.
So then what happened was I kept trying to get closer. They kept pulling away. I thought there was something wrong with me because I was like, oh, they don't want to be friends with me because I'm doing something.
Yeah.
But I never asked them or try to communicate and say, hey, I know this is going on and I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
And so what happened was, instead of communicating, I just kept to myself, and it kept building and building.
And you kind of get resentful, and you also just hate yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a huge thing of that anxious attachment styles do.
Yeah. And the whole time my friend was pulling away, she didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And so then I was just in my own head making assumptions.
Worst case scenarios,
Yeah. And then what happened was, in the end, I was like, I need to say something because I value this friendship and I want to see if you will respond well if I bring this up. And so we sat down and I picked out a very specific situation. I'm like, if I just talk generally, it's not going to be super helpful.
Sure.
So I said, hey, there was this one time you told me that we were going to hang out, and then you didn't. You decided to hang out with other people, and that was hurtful. And what's up with that? And she said, I think that you shouldn't take this too seriously.
Yeah.
And so it became on me, she did not take any responsibility. And then I was like, okay, well, I know deep in my heart that it's not my fault.
Yeah.
But there must be something wrong with me that you chose to hang out with other people and not
instead
me.
of me. Yeah. And I totally, and the scenario you're talking about is so relatable, I think, to everybody out there. We've all been in that situation. And I think the key takeaways are that, this is showing Ethan's growth towards being more secure, because being able to verbalize the things that you want, I feel like it's so frowned upon, especially in society now. It's just be cool, be nonchalant, don't ask for anything, be easygoing, da-da-da. But it's no, if you need something to feel better, you should ask for it.
Yeah.
And also it's on your friend, because you know how you said, you put it out there, and then after that it's her job to see if she's going to reciprocate and meet you there.
Yeah.
I think a lot, again, in this like society of like, oh, we don't care about anyone, everyone's an individual, like no strings attached, we're just like whatever, like, but it's like, no, you are responsible for that other person's happiness. Mm-hmm. Like, not in like a, oh, like it's only relying on you, but for example, Ethan's friend in this situation could have just been like, instead of like not taking any accountability, she could have been like, oh, I'm sorry you like felt bad that we didn't hang out. We can hang out, or I just needed some time and maybe we can do something in the future. Like, instead of just dismissing what he's feeling. Because even a friendship is a kind of relationship, and you are responsible for each other's happiness. Because like otherwise it's like, why are you in my life if you don't care how your actions are affecting me?
Yeah.
That feels very one-sided then.
Yeah.
So that was a very good example.
Thanks. And just very quickly, I think from her perspective, someone being avoidant, being friends with someone who's anxious, the more that I try to get close, ask personal questions, hang out more, it just felt suffocating for her. And so someone who is avoidant, they're not ready for that kind of level of relationship. Avoidant people, I do want to make it clear, they do value intimacy, like what Sania described before. They want to be able to have good friendships and good relationships. But when things cross the line, and the line is unique to them, and it gets too far, and they feel like they don't have their own time, they don't have their own space, that's when they start shutting down and pulling away. And that doesn't mean that they can't have
good relationship.
But specifically when there was someone anxious who's trying to like get closer and closer, that's when they're like,
I really like the way that you explained that, because it is like a threshold, and that's why sometimes I feel like I tiptoe on the line with avoidance, because I feel like, I don't know, like sometimes I feel really like I've used this term to explain how I felt in a friendship that I used to have in the past. Like that I felt suffocated. Yeah. Because this person I felt like was constantly on me. And like, I love this person. I'm choosing to be your friend. I'm choosing to be in your life. I want to give you happiness. You give me happiness. But at some point, it was like every conversation was this like super deep thing. And this person was trying to develop a bond that just really wasn't there. Like it wasn't more than friendship for me. Yeah. So I think part of it was like the intentions were kind of annoying me. But then also just like the constant like, oh, we have to see each other every day. We have to text all the time. Like, I just felt really suffocated, and like I just needed like space. Yeah. And like, so it is avoidant people. You don't, it's not like on a first date you're gonna go and be like, oh, this one's avoidant. Like I'm gonna like, no, you figure it out when the other person is reaching out and they need something. That's when the other that's when the avoidant person will show their avoidant traits.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any scenarios that, like, where you've noticed attachment styles, and when you're reading the book, you're like, oh, I understand, like, the dynamic a little more?
I can speak to, we can do, like, because we did a negative one. I can speak to, like, not a negative one, but I can speak to a secure person and how I knew I was dealing with a secure person. Okay. Yeah. First of all, I made him do the quiz in the book. But I still didn't trust it. I was like, what if he's just answering all the right answers? Because I want to know that. Like, I want the answer to be that he's secure, but
That's how you're so sure.
But no. It's just because this person, in all of his, so he was having troubles. Okay, I'll give you guys one example. He was having troubles with his roommates. He lived in a house with like 6 people, and one or two of the roommates had a tendency to never ever do the dishes. So, and they have like a chore chart. So it was these 2 people's week to do the dishes and clear them away. Other people obviously need to use the kitchen, and so if that chore isn't done and those dishes are piled up, someone's going to do it, even if it's not their week. So let's say person 1 and 2 didn't do their chores. They were chilling in their room. Person 3 is like a very easygoing person. They're like, oh, I'm just going to do all these dishes because I need to cook. I need space. Person 4 comes in, super hot-headed, and sends like a really passive-aggressive text, generalizing things, not communicating effectively, like being like, oh, you guys always do this. This was supposed to be your responsibility. Like, what? Like, how can you not have time? We're all busy. Like, so at this point, when you're saying all these statements, I think when we talk, we feel like we're getting to the point, but that any of those statements, like, you never do this, everybody has time to do it, those are not the crux of the matter. And my friend who had a secure attachment style in his group chat responded in a very he wasn't accusing anyone, in a very like normal tone. It wasn't like somebody, committed a crime against him, in just like a super normal way. Like, hey guys, like, this was supposed to be your chore. It would be nice if it could get done because somebody else had to go out of their way to do it. Next time, if you guys can't do it, just let us know and we'll take care of it and we can switch weeks around or something.
Yeah.
So I clearly identified and communicated the problem. He, first of all, before all of that, he like deflated the situation. Where it was escalating when this person who doesn't communicate well came in and like pointing fingers and you did everything wrong. Even though this person that was accusing them and stuff, he didn't do the dishes. He didn't have to, like, he was not involved in the problem. He just saw it happen and he was, I don't know, standing up for his friend.
Yeah.
Which is good. You should stand up for your friends, but the way that he went about it was so wrong.
Yeah.
And when my friend with the secure attachment style, he approached the problem, he was very like specific. He was using, I think Ethan has brought this up before, maybe on camera or off camera. He was using like a lot of like I statements. Oh, I feel like it's hard to be in the kitchen and cook when this is like this. Instead of making it about them, being like, you guys are so dirty. How could you live like this? Like, and then a big thing, and it's because this one incident really resonated with me because I was having a lot of issues communicating with my friend at the time.
Yeah. And
I just asked him, like, how can you not get pissed off? Like, if I was in that situation, I would have totally reacted like that other person, the hot-headed person, And, like, I would just jump to worst case scenario and just, like, assume that person's, like, a horrible, dirty pig, like, and I would be mean to them and stuff like that. And I would just come and be like, oh, we're just going to have separate dishes from now on. Like, I would come to them with, like, a conclusion made up.
Yeah.
And just say, this is how it's going to be.
Yeah.
But the secure person, they don't think so much on their own. Like he said, he saw the problem, he processed it then, and he texted then. He didn't sit on it for like weeks and weeks and let it fester and think about all the different cases and and he just came to it like a conversation. He was like open to hearing what the other people had to say. He wasn't telling them that they were wrong. He wasn't telling them this is how it's going to be. He just addressed the problem. He gave a suggestion for a solution. He's like, what do you guys think?
Yeah.
And so I just thought it was really cool to see that going on. And it made me want to implement that into my not so secure communication style. Because, who doesn't have roommate troubles? Yeah. But it was just like really cool to see the way that he responded to it.
Yeah.
Compared to how the other people responded.
Do you remember in the book, because I forget already, what percentage of the population the book estimates to be secure?
It's like 50 plus.
Okay.
So more than, if you go on 10 dates, more than half of those dates are going to be secure.
Yeah, mathematically. And that gets into a huge point in this book where the strongest relationships to have the best chance to move forward and be healthy in the long run are ones where at least there is one person who is secure. So either both people are secure, or someone who is anxious or someone who is avoidant is with someone who is secure. And those relationships work well because the person who is secure in general is an effective communicator.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean like it's always going to be good every single time, but they're able to express how they feel in a non-accusing way. And someone who is anxious and someone who is avoidant, they need that. So the person who is anxious, they need reassurance, which is what the secure person can give them, and that kind of validation, words of affirmation. The person who is avoidant, this gets a little more tricky, but someone who is secure will usually understand where the avoidant person is coming from and ask, hey, is this happening because you need more space? And then they're able to adjust to that. So,
and they're secure in themselves and they can give that space.
Yes.
They won't think like, oh my gosh, he hates me if he's asking for space.
Yeah. So that's like one of the major points in this book. And so if you're listening out there and now you're thinking about your relationships in the past, or even the type of relationship you want in the future, this hopefully will help you know what to look for
Yeah.
after you understand your attachment style better. But then also, you can choose how you want to be. Of
100%.
course, our upbringing, our friendships, our experience in school or in our jobs affects who we are. But these attachment styles, they don't have to define you. You can put in the work to become a more effective communicator,
Definitely.
to trust people more, and that's gonna, the anxious and avoidant attachment styles, they fall under the umbrella of insecure.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you fall into one of those just because it's hard to trust people. Like, people have broken your trust in the past.
Yeah.
And so, like, through therapy or taking little steps to ask people to hang out and take baby steps towards building friendships that you enjoy, that can help you become more secure.
I think, like, a huge thing about all of these attachment styles in the book and just everything we're talking about today, it all, I feel like, for me, boils down to, like, just communicating.
Yeah.
And, like, the last chapter in the book is about communicating, so it's, like, fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
And that's something, like Ethan said, because none of us are, like, stationary characters, you know, we're always changing. And I want to become definitely a better communicator. That's one thing I flagged, like, you know, it's always been hard to ask for what I want. And I think, it stems from, like, when I needed to ask my dad if I could go hang out with my friends, you know, I would do all these chores all day. I would be like a good girl, get good grades, and then I would ask. But it's like, no, if you want to ask, just ask. And if it's a yes, okay. If it's a no, also okay. And it's just about being able to not be in your head, not think, like, don't go into conversations with, like, a desired result. Like, a lot of times, like, that's why, at least me, like, I don't bring up certain stuff because I'm, like, assuming the worst or assuming that this is what the outcome is going to be. But just like when I talk to my secure friend, the good communicator, he says he just, like, is present in the conversation. Like, he's not directing it to have a certain outcome. He just, like, asks for what he needs, and that's it. Like, it and honestly, it'll, like, it should take a lot of stress out of your life if you're just able to practice some of these more secure tactics, like, whether it's in school, at work, like, with your teachers, like, I don't know, in any relationships that you're having.
Yeah. I think a lot of times when you're afraid to ask for what you want, it's because you feel like in the past you had to earn it.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I resonate with that a lot. And of course, in life, there are many things that it feels like we have to earn our status, but at the same time, hopefully you have certain relationships or friendships where you don't feel like you have to earn that other person's attention or care or even them just liking you.
Yeah.
And so if you feel insecure, remember those people who you don't have to earn that love from and build from that. Because when we start thinking we have to earn everything, then it just becomes so bad.
You start putting a lot of pressure
Yeah.
on every conversation, every interaction, and that's just not good.
Yeah, and then you don't ask.
Yeah.
And I love what you were talking about, Sania, about how asking is actually a win-win situation. A lot of times to us, it feels lose-lose, but you're saying if you ask and they say yes, okay, you win. But if you ask and they say no, then the key thing then is to kind of redirect yourself and say, okay, maybe this is not a bad thing. I know where they stand more.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not supposed to be the person that I date or the person that I marry or my true friend. And now they've shown
Like,
that.
you don't need to be super rigid in that conversation that, like, absolutely, like, unwilling to hear a no. And if you start hearing a no, your alarm bells start going off.
Right.
And I feel like personally, like, that's what happens to me a lot.
Yeah.
Like, when stuff is going not the way that I want, or, like, just different stuff. And it's like, no, you need to, like, be able to, I don't know, have the patience, like, maybe take a beat, think about it for a minute, like, the book gives lots of different strategies, like, like go for a walk, read a book, like just do something to just like get out of that immediate alarm, like immediate reaction state, so that you can think a little more clearly. Like it says that, if you're an anxious person, if you have an anxious attachment style, your reaction time to situations is very quick, quicker than the secure. And like, in life we think quick is very good, but it's not good. You should take a beat so you can react the right way. And like they did a study that found if you take a minute to process and then react, your, the way you're reading a situation changes. Your outlook on things changes. An avoidant person is typically slow to react to people's behavioral changes because, they're not looking at those little cues. A secure person takes just the right amount of time. So, just try to keep yourself calm, try to keep your life stress-free, and just literally, if people watching want to practice being more secure, I would say you can just start by
asking Chat GPT. That's our end segment.
Asking Chat GPT. I'm curious to see.
We're gonna talk about that.
I'm so curious to see what Chat GPT is going to say.
Do you want to just give like one advice?
Piece of advice. Also from personal experience, so when anxious people are in fights with people, a lot of times, and like again, like I said, the book was uncomfortable to read because I didn't want to admit this, but a lot of times they feel like they're not loved. And like when they're in a fight with someone, they feel like all bonds are gone, like this is the end of the relationship. And so one thing that I really liked that a secure partner that I had did was like he verbalized it. He was like, hey, like I know we're disagreeing, but I still love you a lot, right?
Wow.
Like we're gonna figure this out. And it was right after I told him to read this, to read a chapter in it. But
wow.
And it just like all of my alarm bells, everything just shut down. And then the only problem was like the problem at hand. All of a sudden, for those next 30 minutes, I was secure because all my worries just went away. So for people watching, if you're anxious, I know I'm anxious in a conflict, I'm going to take an active decision in trying to just let the other person know, like, hey, I know we have a disagreement, but like, I still love you and I want to figure this out.
Wow.
Even though you could be in the worst of disagreements, because like just saying it to that person, it like you're expressing what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And it'll help them because
Right.
you're being more secure.
Good job. Wow. That is crazy. I'm taking notes. Okay. So, and I think the key to becoming an effective communicator is to like de-escalate things in your mind.
1000%.
Lower the pressure.
In your mind is so right.
Yeah, and this applies not just to relationships anymore. Like let's say you're hesitant about asking for a raise at work, or you're not happy about your bonus, or you're like
You got a bad grade on a test and you want to regrade. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
In that situation, a lot of times we don't ask because we're like, this is gonna make things so messy.
Yeah.
They're gonna like judge me for being so like,
and what if they
nitpicky.
say no? How am I going to react in front of them?
Yeah.
Like, it's all stuff you could be scared of.
Right. And at the end of the day, the only thing we can control is ourselves. And if other people react badly, then that's on them. But in these situations, we're talking about advocating for yourself, not like trying to take advantage of other people and ask for those things. But if you're ever in a position where you want to defend yourself or advocate for yourself, those are situations where if the other person says no, that is more of an issue with them than on you. And we hope that you feel empowered to ask. And a lot of times when things go well and they say yes, or they explain why it's a no, and it makes sense, your relationship becomes stronger. And now you don't have to just live with assumptions in your head. Now you have something more concrete to build on. So that is like what I have to say on that. And then I do want to point out, so this book one of the weaknesses, in my opinion, is it doesn't talk about what happens when two anxious people are together or two avoidant people are together. And I just want to touch on that a little bit.
That's true.
And so when I first met Breadcrumber, we were talking about this book. And so we're talking about our own attachment styles. And we both lean anxious. And so I was wondering how that's going to work out. And you guys know what happened.
I've also been in a double anxious relationship.
So in the end, I got ghosted, and I'm like, wait, this doesn't make sense. And an anxious person, their tendency is not to ghost. That's an avoidant person.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, okay, well, this is a good framework to understand relationships in general, but people are just going to do like whatever they want at the end of the day. And she still kind of acted as an anxious person. She saw something that maybe was an issue for her, and there was no conflict, but her gut instinct was to just hold it in.
Yeah.
And
then, not communicate it.
Yeah. And so I think when you have two anxious people together or two avoidant people together, the main thing that happens is their relationship doesn't grow.
Yeah. Because neither of them can communicate.
Neither of them can communicate, and they just act the way that they think everyone acts. And so it just kind of continue
the cycle.
Exactly.
Because in relationships, you're sort of mirroring the other person's behavior.
Yeah.
And if what you're seeing is what you're already doing, you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Like my first relationship, I think we were both, I mean, I used to be more secure then, but we were both like, if I had to like put a word to it, we were both anxious.
Yeah.
And it would just be like both of us building on each other's bad behavior. Like especially in the first 6 months of the relationship, I think every fight we would be like, oh, I'm breaking up with you, and like walking away. But just as like a protest behavior, just as a way to get them to come and talk to you and make you feel loved again. So it was just like a very like endless cycle. And it's like very endless because there's no hope for it getting better.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that if you are in a relationship with someone and you're anxious and you've identified your partner as anxious, you can be the more secure person. Stuff can change in your life or in their life that just makes them as an individual more secure. And then that's going to seep into your relationship as well.
Yeah.
So it's not that there's no hope, but it's a little bit harder to get out of it when the person in front of you is not a secure person.
Yes. And one other thing that I think I really liked that this book talked about was how even if you're in a relationship with a secure person, they can change too, which is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like a secure person who is, for example, with someone avoidant. If the avoidant person becomes very, very avoidant, the secure person, if the secure person is not getting the answers that they're asking for, they can start to become more anxious.
Yeah.
Because they're not understanding what's going on. So be careful of that. If you are secure, just know that is possible, and check yourself and make sure that you are cared for, and that when you're making an effort to communicate, that there's like some kind of reciprocation. But then also, if you are anxious or you're avoidant and you're with someone who is secure, be very aware that if you're not able to communicate, then your partner is still going to be affected by that.
Yeah. Just because they're secure doesn't mean they're invincible.
Yeah.
Two secure people in a relationship will also have lots of fights and arguments. But yeah, I think as a secure person, if you're with somebody, like, I guess the key thing is to not really let them change you. Like we say, in relationships, you mimic each other's behavior. So if this avoidant person is avoiding, like, maybe even though you're secure, maybe you're going to start playing that game and be like, oh, I'll be hard to get too, just to play. Or, if they're being, or maybe they're going to make you question yourself. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to like being sure of yourself.
Yeah.
And then, being a good communicator. And like, I feel like those are the key things. Because if a secure person was with an anxious person and they just didn't feel good, it didn't feel right, they weren't, their basic needs were not being met, they should, maybe that's like an indication to walk away.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like if you're trying as best as you can, you're communicating effectively, but this other person is just not able to meet you there, that's okay. Like that's time to part ways, but don't let them change you and make you worse.
Change you in terms of attachment style.
Yes.
Like you can change in other ways, like building better habits.
Yeah. Like don't let people stress you out and make you more insecure and make you, you know, play the game of like, oh, he texted in 4 hours, I'm gonna do it in 8. Like those are all tiny things, but they're all stemming from different attachment styles. I feel like.
Yeah. The very last thing I want to say, because I keep thinking about like gold nuggets in this book, and
there's so many.
We really recommend that you guys give this book a try. But the anxious avoidant attachment style, other people call it disorganized, so it's known as anxious avoidant or it's known as disorganized. And just to talk about this one a little more, this one is the rarest in terms of like how many people have this attachment style. But a lot of times people who are anxious avoidant, they started out as anxious and they didn't get the intimacy they were looking for, and so they start
too many avoidant relationships.
Yeah, maybe. And then they start pushing people away, and so they're kind of stuck in a hard place because they want close relationships, but to protect themselves they push people away.
Wait, I'm definitely tiptoeing this anxious avoidant line, Ethan. I think the book's diagnosis was maybe correct.
So I can see that, like, and you're on this relationship break right now, but not because of someone avoidant.
I mean, I feel like it is a little bit that too, because I feel like there's stuff that's happened that I haven't told you about on or off the podcast.
Damn, that's why I don't know the real you.
Don't worry,
because you're keeping it to yourself.
we're gonna get into the vault at some point, but there's just been stuff that keeps happening that like almost makes me like lose hope in relationships and like give up on like ever being able to have that kind of feeling of being understood and feeling of being like loved or cared for by a person. Because I feel like people always misbehave or people will always disappoint. And so, like, even though, like, deep down I crave that, and I think that's why whenever I'm like, oh, I'm running back to Canada, it's because when I'm at home with my family, I feel so secure. I know that I'm loved. I know that, like, I'm cared for. And, like, it feels like all my worries just, leave my body. But then sometimes here, and especially because anxious people tend to always gravitate towards avoidant partners. I think the book also says that. And so I've had one too many avoidant partners, I think, and it's like feeding my anxieties and making me feel like, oh, it's me. But then I'm also like, maybe it's not me. Maybe I just need to be cooler and like hit them with what they're giving me and also not care and see what that like. So it's really hard because what I want and the way I'm behaving and what I'm doing are like, it's like that's why I'm not ever able to, that thing that I want, the closeness I'm craving is always out of reach because going in like these two different directions.
Yeah, thanks for talking about that. Okay, I feel like we've reached a good point. And so we're going to now wrap this episode up with what would Chat GPT do? And so we've asked Chat GPT, how can I develop a more secure attachment style? We're not going to read every single one, but you see the question here. I'm going to just read the
headings.
The heading. Yeah, exactly. So it says, developing a more secure attachment style involves self-awareness, emotional regulation, and building healthy relationship habits. Here are some steps you can take. So I'm going to read the headings now, and then I think I want us to point out what resonates most with us.
Okay.
And what we agree with the most. So first one, understanding your current attachment style. 2, practice self-awareness and emotional regulation. 3, work on self-esteem and self-worth. 4, build healthy relationship habits. 5, seek support. 6, challenge negative beliefs. And 7, practice patience and compassion.
Okay. I already 3 jumped out at me.
Oh, yeah?
It's not just 1, but 3.
Okay.
So number 2,
number 2.
was to practice self-awareness and emotional regulation.
Yeah.
That one, do you want me to list all 3 that jumped out?
Yeah.
The other one was, I think, number 6, to challenge your negative beliefs.
Yeah.
And then number 7 is to practice patience and compassion. And I feel like the reason that those jumped out to me was because they're all I feel like they all work towards making you a better communicator and more emotionally stable. And I think when you're emotionally stable and less erratic and your thoughts are less negative and assuming worst case, then you become a better communicator. You can positively influence any relationship that you're in. Yeah. Whether it's with an anxious and avoidant or a secure person, your work on yourself. I like those 3 because they're all about your work on yourself can be a positive impact on those around you.
Definitely.
What about you?
I think for me, communication, like we talked about, so under number 4, and then also number 3, setting boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
and not allowing people to take advantage of you.
Yeah.
and saying, hey, this person is not good for me. They're avoidant, and there's always this cycle of hot and cold, which we did not talk about.
Yeah.
And or just watch the hot and cold episode, but
I know he's thinking of the number.
no, I was thinking if I should expound on this more, but the hot and cold cycle happens a lot in anxious avoidant relationships. And then the last one that I want to talk about personally is under number 6, reframe negative thoughts. And so when I was in grad school, I took a 1-week class about how to have a flourishing life.
Okay.
And they gave us this tool called Name, Tame, and Reframe. And I want to talk about this just so you guys have this tool to use for yourself. When you go through a stressful situation, something traumatic, you can use this tool to... It's a mindfulness strategy. It is a way to take yourself out of that stressful situation in the moment. And so the first thing you do is name. Name what happened to you, what is making you upset, how are you feeling, name it all. And then the next one, tame. So is there anything that you're saying where you're exaggerating, where you are
assuming worst case?
Exactly. Just tell yourself what are those things. And just
get rid of the extremes, kind of.
Yes. Yeah. And then the last one, reframe. And this is what Chat GPT points out. But based on everything that you listed, what are the other possibilities that can be going on? So someone hurt you. Is that because they don't like you? Or is it a possibility that they're just having a bad day? Or is it a possibility that they're hurting from something else and they're lashing out on you? And so I like this tool because when I go through something hard, I live off my assumptions. I'm unable to separate the truths from the lies
in your mind. Yeah.
And this tool just helps me think about all the different scenarios. And when I consider how maybe they're just not out to get me, maybe there's other circumstances that I don't understand, then I feel better about myself because it's probably not all about me. And then I kind of know what questions I can ask and how I can communicate and say, hey, did this happen because you're going through a divorce at home, or like you just had a really bad breakup?
Yeah.
And that will help me like focus my thoughts and know what to ask them to support them as a friend, and also figure out if they're just being a jerk or not.
I really like that. That's a really good strategy. I think it helps alleviate a lot of that pressure off of you and the weight off your shoulders.
Yeah.
And like it gets you out of that cycle of like living in that horrible negative space in your head, and it like grounds you a little and brings you back to like being present and like what's really going on. So it's really good.
Cool. So
Chat GPT did a good job.
yeah, I did a good job, but it's always such a long answer. Like,
Chat GPT, dude, learn to summarize.
oh man, I wonder now if we ask ChatGPT to narrow
Summarize it?
this down into like 3 points.
Oh, they could. It could do it for
but
sure.
maybe when it choose our like top 3. So,
Okay, true. That's true.
Okay.
All right. I think very good episode.
Yeah.
We will keep talking about concepts from this book, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And we hope you enjoy your path to self-discovery.
Yeah.
That hopefully maybe started because of this episode, and then we'll continue. Hopefully, if you read the book, read the Cliff Notes version, Google it. I'm sure attachment theory stuff is everywhere now.
Yeah. Like, we might actually just call this episode part 1. And if you guys have any questions or thoughts,
yeah.
let us know.
And we can bring it back.
No one ever lets us know. But if you let us
Yes.
know, we will know what to talk about next time. And we can talk about a lot of things. Like this book, if you're not a big reader, we'll read it for you. You know? So just we welcome you to share your thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you guys in the next one.